If you don't know these two guys, this over here is Keith Skilling and Warren Denholm. Warren will speak to us first about building this aircraft.
My name's Warren Denholm, and I run a little aircraft restoration shop up at Ardmore Airfield, and we have been working on the airplane you see behind us since 2005. Those of you that have seen it flying today have witnessed something truly special, I think. Yeah. And if you're lucky enough to be like Keith and I and get to go in it, well then you have experienced something that truly is fantastic. It's a Canadian-built Mosquito, an FB26, which is the same as the Mosquitoes that the RNZF operated here between 1948 and 1952. This airplane has Rolls-Royce Merlin 25s in it, which came from the RNZF. The Canadian-built airplane had a Packard Merlin in it because obviously they were from North America. But the New Zealand-built ones were English airplanes and had a Rolls-Royce built engine in it. Although this airplane had never flown in New Zealand before, these engines had actually flown with the RNZF prior to us getting it done. This airplane is painted in the RAF paint scheme, but it's the EG letters on the side signify 487 Squadron, RAF 487 Squadron, which was a squadron manned almost entirely by Kiwis. 487 Squadron was mostly famous for its involvement in the Amiens prison raid that you may have heard of. It's called Operation Jericho, where three groups of mosquitoes flew across to France and bombed a prison that had been taken over by the Gestapo and were holding a whole lot of French resistance prisoners there. And the story was that they were going to be killed, executed, and so they decided to blow the walls of the prison out and try and give the resistance members an opportunity to escape before they were going to be executed. So 487 Squadron was part of that group, and 487 Squadron pilots and Mosquitoes dropped bombs on the prison and blew holes in the walls, and were an instrumental part in the success of that raid. So it belongs to a fellow by the name of Jerry Yagan, who is a fabulous collector of aeroplanes. He has a museum in Virginia Beach, which is on the east coast of the United States, called the Military Aviation Museum. We have done a couple of other airplane restorations for him before. First one was a P-40 Kitty Hawk, which we finished in 2003, and then the next one was a de Havilland Dragon Rapide, which we finished in 2010, and you may have seen it, if any of you have been to Wanaka, you may have seen it at Wanaka in 2010. MOTAT always had a mosquito project that they were trying to restore at their museum in Auckland, and some of the fellows from Ardmore were working at MOTAT helping assemble the airplane that they've got on display there now. And as a sort of payment for working on MOTAT's airplane, some of these volunteers got given a whole lot of mosquito parts. And one of the group that was involved in it at that time was a fellow by the name of Glen Powell, and he was really captivated by the idea, I guess, of building the Mosquito. So he set about to go around the world and find all the mosquito drawings that he could get hold of from England, Canada and Australia. And that took him quite a long time, and while he was doing that, all these other guys that had sort of been part of the group sort of fell by the wayside, and he ended up more or less a solo effort. So for those of you that don't know how a Mosquito is constructed, it's a little bit like a model aeroplane. So imagine the fuselage is split right down the middle and made in two halves, a bit like two halves of an eggshell. And you start off with a male mould with slots in it, a little bit like a toast rack, and you lay your plywood all over this mould and you strap it down with steel bands and glue all the bulkheads together inside it. Then you put spruce sort of stiffeners around anywhere there's a cutout, and then you fill all the gaps between all those pieces of spruce with 1/2 inch thick balsa wood, and then you wrap plywood over the outside again, and then you strap these steel bands down and tighten it all up, and all the glue goes hard, and voila, you've got half a Mosquito fuselage. And if it took anything like as long as I took to tell it, it wouldn't be a big deal, but unfortunately it takes a long time, especially if you haven't got one to copy. So Glen built these moulds, made a fuselage off them that was for a museum in Canada, and at about the time that he finished that, I went up and visited him at his workshops in Drury and saw the mould for the fuselage and thought, you know, that's pretty fantastic, the work he's done on it. And that is singularly the thing that, you know, makes or breaks a mosquito project, is if you can build the fuselage. So about that time, we'd just finished a Kitty Hawk for Jerry Yagan, and he was talking to me about, well, what are we going to do next, Warren? You know, do you have anything in mind? And I said, well, have you thought anything about a mosquito? There's a guy here in Auckland who's made the mould to build the fuselage. Maybe we should do a mosquito. Well, he didn't really know too much about mosquitoes at that point, and neither did I really. But you know, the idea he thought was quite interesting. So he said, yeah, let's have a look at it. Glen knew of a project in Canada that was available, which is this aeroplane. And subsequently, Jerry bought the project from a guy, Ed Zaleski, in British Columbia, and had it shipped down to New Zealand. And when I say project, it was about as rumpy as you could imagine, you know. The fuselage was completely rotten from front to back and had broken in half in its process of being sort of moved around over the years. The engine had been ripped off it, the landing gear was gone. But, you know, most of the sort of interesting bits, like all the pieces in the cockpit and, you know, all the control system throughout the fuselage and all the metalwork that goes to make up a mosquito was all there, but the wood was had it. So we brought that project down to New Zealand and arrived late 2004, and work started on it in 2005. Glen built the fuselage first. It took him a year, and then he started on the wing, and by 2007 all the woodwork had been done, and we were you know, going through the process of you know, overhauling everything. I know that 5 of the 6 blades are actually Lancaster blades. The two aeroplanes that have Merlin engines and this propeller configuration are the Lancaster and the Mosquito. And Lancasters actually have a propeller that's 6 inches bigger in diameter than a Mosquito, but the blade is the same profile. And there were more Lancaster propeller blades made than Mosquitoes, obviously. And so there's a lot more spare Lancaster blades around. And so these are actually Lancaster blades that have been trimmed down to the right size for a mosquito, and one of them is a mosquito blade. The wing is one piece, so it's 54 feet with the wingtips on from side to side, so it won't fit in any normal kind of container. So we are buying 2 40-foot containers and cutting them down to 30 feet each and joining them together and making a super container that's 60 feet long, an open top one, and we're going to put the wing on a stand and lower it into the container and then cover it all over, and it'll go on the top of a ship. The fuselage and the engines and all the rest of it will go in regular shipping containers, and it'll go through the Panama Canal and up the east coast of the United States, and then we'll go over and put it back together again. If you get 500 hours out of a Merlin these days, then you should count yourself lucky. About 500 hours is sort of normal. Some people do get more, people that fly them very carefully and only one pilot sort of thing. But yeah, 500 hours it would be about what you would expect.
And speaking about money, what does that cost every 500 hours, you reckon? A bit vulgar, I know, but that's the next question, isn't it?
Well, you don't spend it with me, so it's okay to say. These engines cost $128,000 US more or less to overhaul each, which, you know, let's say, for instance, and don't quote me on this, but let's say this was a $10 million aeroplane, which it isn't, but let's say it was. And the engines were only $150,000 each, then that does not represent a particularly big chunk of the overall value of the aeroplane. So the engines in warbirds are the cheapest and the easiest part to sort of satisfy. They don't cost as much as you would think, and there's plenty of them around. It's sort of unusual that way. World War I aeroplane's almost the opposite. The engines, or Keith will be able to tell you about this as well, the engines are the hardest part to get for a World War I aeroplane because there's virtually no engines left. It uses about 450 litres per hour. In that hour you can go 250 odd miles, so I don't know, whatever that is. Yeah, no, you don't really want to think about the fuel aspect of it. It's quite thirsty.
Right, everybody, I'd like to say thank you very much to Warren and his team for building this aircraft and, of course, addressing us and telling us all about it right now. Thanks, Warren. Here you go, George.